She held the note in trembling hands. "You have to come back. They know." The paper was wrinkled, stained, but unmistakable. The handwriting was his, Gabriel's. But how? How could he write something like this if he was paralyzed? Isabella stared into the bathroom mirror of the mansion. The reflection showed a woman exhausted, wounded, but on the verge of doing the unthinkable. Across the house, he lay confined to a bed, or so everyone thought, because that night, that cursed stormy night, she saw him, standing. The man who had pretended to be immobile for years was there, alive, aware, and afraid. "Why did you lie to me?" she whispered through tears. "To protect you," he said, with the voice she swore she'd never hear again. But in that house, protection was a dangerous word. Now she knew too much. She knew the secret. She knew the lie. And more than anything, she knew the father of her 3 children had never really been absent. What Isabella didn't know was what to do with the truth, because between saving Gabriel and saving herself, she would have to make a choice, and that choice starts now. Isabella clutched her scarf tightly against her chest as she stepped off the overcrowded bus into a gray morning. Fog covered the narrow streets of Inverness like a silent veil, as if the world itself were trying to hide from her the things she had spent years trying to forget. The damp sidewalks, the dull sky, the scent of fresh bread from the corner bakery, everything felt like part of a set designed to remind her that, despite pushing forward, she still carried scars no one could see. At 29, Isabella was a woman who had learned to take a deep breath before answering anything. Her honey-colored eyes held the faded shine of someone who had cried too many tears to be easily moved again. Her hair, once long and curly, now stayed pinned in a messy bun, less for style, more for survival. She was a single mother of 3, triplets, 3 little hearts beating outside her body since the day each was born, through pain, fear, and a silence no one could ever truly fill. She worked as a home care nurse, split her days between adult diapers, cold-packed meals, and tight schedules, always with a worn-out soul, yet a steady smile for her children. They lived in an apartment far too small for 4, but its walls were covered in drawings and filled with improvised love. And beneath the fatigue on her shoulders and the strength in her steps, there was one truth no one knew. The children's father had no idea they existed. Isabella had never told him, not out of pride, but out of fear. Fear that the same rejection she once knew so well would repeat itself. Fear that, if she looked for him, he'd say with his eyes what his absence had already screamed for years. "I don't care." Gabriel, a name that still echoed in the back of her mind, even after 5 years. He had appeared like a breath of summer air at a university party in Edinburgh, where a friend had dragged her along. His eyes smiled before his mouth did, and he had a way of listening that made any woman feel like the only one in the room. They had one night, just one, but it was intense. No promises, yet full of everything that could have been. And then, he disappeared. No explanation, no number, no goodbye. Isabella found out she was pregnant weeks later. 3 heartbeats, 3 lives, and no support system. Her parents kicked her out. Her friends vanished. The only helping hand came from a distant aunt, who no longer remembered what family felt like, but she offered a roof, hot tea, and silence. And sometimes, that's all you need. Since then, she survived. She dreamed in secret, held onto letters she never wrote, and names she never dared to say aloud. Deep down, she still believed in love. Just not for her, maybe for her children, maybe in another life. But that morning felt different. She was starting a new job, caring for a wealthy man, immobilized after an accident. The position had come like a miracle. Good pay, stable hours, housing included. It was everything she needed, everything she thought she wanted, or so she believed. What Isabella didn't know was that the man she was about to care for was her past, waiting for her in a bed. The day hadn't started well. One of the boys had thrown up in the middle of the night. The second had a fever, and the third had tried to put the hamster inside the freezer drawer. Isabella had barely slept. Still, there she was, punctual, wearing the St. Clair Clinic uniform she had ironed in a hurry, and a crooked bun held together by an eyebrow pencil. At the clinic, she was greeted coldly by a receptionist with a nasal voice and rhinestone-covered nails. "You're the new nurse for the Graham case?" she asked without looking up. "Yes, I'm Isabella Costa." Patience, discretion, and no questions. The family is very private. She was handed a brown envelope with the patient's address and left for the bus stop. In her rush, she bumped into a stylish woman getting out of a luxury car. The papers she carried scattered across the pavement, mixing with the woman's. "Watch it!" the woman snapped, picking up her documents with visible disgust. "These caregivers don't even know where they're walking." Isabella froze, swallowed hard, felt heat rise to her face, but took a deep breath. She crouched down, gathered the papers carefully, and replied in a soft, steady voice, "I'm sorry. Have a good day." The woman turned away like she didn't exist. Isabella walked on, but her eyes burned. She thought about turning around, going home, pretending none of it mattered. But then, opening her bag, she found a folded piece of paper between her children's books. A child's note. "Good luck, Mommy. You're our hero." Beneath it were 3 crooked drawings of hearts, holding hands with a woman who had messy hair. She smiled. Later that day, when she arrived at the Graham mansion, she was greeted by a housekeeper who led her through the silent hallways to the patient's room. "He doesn't speak. He doesn't move. He doesn't like eye contact," the woman warned. Isabella nodded. She opened the door slowly and froze. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, was Gabriel, the man she had once loved, the father of her children, the name she had tried to forget. The world spun. Her body trembled. Her heart pounded in her throat. Her soul screamed. But on the outside, she stood firm. He didn't recognize her, or pretended not to. And in that moment, Isabella knew the past wasn't buried. It was only asleep, and about to wake up. The Graham mansion rose like a monument to silence and appearances. Isolated atop a hill on the outskirts of Inverness, it was surrounded by gardens shaped with military precision, and tall iron gates covered in ivy. The massive windows always had their curtains half closed, as if they were hiding more than just sunlight. It wasn't the kind of place that welcomed visitors. It was the kind that watched the world from above. Isabella arrived on a cold afternoon, carrying a backpack, a folded lab coat, and the distinct feeling that she was stepping into another universe. The housekeeper, Mrs. Inez, greeted her with the stiffness of royal protocol. No smiles, no questions, no trace of hospitality. "You'll be working directly in Mr. Gabriel's room. The East Wing is reserved for his care. The rest of the house is none of your concern." The chill in her tone didn't surprise Isabella. The house itself seemed to demand that kind of posture. She was led down long corridors, where wooden floors creaked beneath her steps, and the walls were lined with portraits of the Graham ancestors, all with the same sharp features: light eyes, firm jaws, proud expressions. Gabriel's room was large and dim. The fireplace had never been lit. Heavy curtains muffled all sound and light. At the center, a hospital bed with modern equipment. And there, motionless like a sculpture, lay Gabriel. Isabella felt the floor vanish beneath her feet. His face was unmistakable. Those firm features, angular jaw, slightly crooked nose. The same nose she had touched on that single night 5 years ago. It was him, the same man who had vanished from her life, the one who had never known his children existed. She tried to hide the impact, but her legs trembled. She wanted to run, but she stayed. Responsibility, necessity, her children, all of it held her there. The mood in the house was one of restrained tension. Everything was too clean, too quiet, too formal. The few staff spoke little, and even in silence, they looked at her with a mix of pity and caution, as if they knew something she didn't. In the first few days, Isabella moved on autopilot. She washed, organized, fed Gabriel via his tube, administered medication according to the chart. She tried not to look him in the eyes, tried not to think about that night in Edinburgh, but something inside her screamed with every movement. That presence, that silence, something wasn't right. Then she began to notice the details. His eyes followed hers. His eyelids flinched at times, a subtle tremor in his pinky finger. And most of all, what disturbed her the most, Gabriel seemed to recognize her, but pretended not to. It was on a gray morning that she met the first ghost of the house, Renato, Gabriel's younger brother. He arrived in a luxury car, wearing a suit far too expensive for someone who claimed to be just passing through. Young, handsome, and with the same cold stare as their mother. He walked into the house like he was already bored with everything he saw. "You're the new caregiver?" he asked, not waiting for an answer. "Yes, Isabella Costa. Don't get too attached, he muttered as he walked past her, his smile never reaching his eyes. Renato made no effort to hide his discomfort with Gabriel's condition. Sometimes he spent hours in the study with the family's lawyers, discussing documents no one else was allowed to see. Other times, he locked himself in a room with their mother, and muffled arguments echoed through the hallways. Gabriel's mother, Mrs. Adelaide, was an even more intimidating presence. Elegant, authoritative. Her face wore a constant expression of mourning. She appeared only when she wanted to remind everyone who really ran the house. One afternoon, while Isabella served tea to the staff, Adelaide entered the kitchen unannounced. She looked at the scene with disdain and said aloud, to no one in particular, "Sometimes charity opens doors for people who never should have crossed our gates." The silence that followed hurt more than a slap. Isabella lowered her eyes. She felt like an unwelcome intruder, a piece that didn't belong on the board. But it was Donna Celia, the cook, who brought warmth to that cold house. A woman with a soft voice, calloused hands, and eyes that had seen too much. She made hibiscus tea every evening. "He recognized you," she said one night, stirring a pot with her wooden spoon. "From the very first day, but he's scared." And not of the paralysis. Isabella swallowed hard. Scared of what? Of whoever's pulling the strings behind this entire performance. That sentence echoed in Isabella's mind for days. She started noticing things. The medication schedules, the dates, the reactions, and a dark truth began to take shape. Gabriel wasn't ill. He was being kept that way. But why? And by whom? The questions piled up. The air in the house grew more suffocating by the hour. What started as an unexpected reunion had become a web of lies and manipulation. Isabella didn't know who to trust, but one thing was certain. Someone in that house wanted Gabriel silent, and if she wasn't careful, they'd silence her too. That night, the storm outside seemed to echo the chaos inside Isabella. Lightning slashed the sky like open wounds across heavy clouds, and thunder made the windows of the mansion's east wing tremble. It was her first night on shift alone, and, coincidentally, the first time she saw Gabriel blink, not as a reflex, but as if to say, "I'm here." The clock read 2:17 a.m. The generator had flickered twice, and the emergency lights cast a ghostly blue glow across the room. Isabella stepped in to check vitals and replace the IV fluids, but the moment she approached the bed, she felt it. The silence was the same, the sterile scent of saline, unchanged, but something in his eyes had shifted. A presence. She hesitated before touching him. Her fingers reached for his arm to check his temperature, and unintentionally their eyes met. It was like time stopped. For a few seconds, Isabella felt like she was back at that party in Edinburgh. Flashing lights, loud music, his laugh in her ear, that fleeting sense of being truly seen, like they were the only two people in the world. "Gabriel," she whispered, barely realizing it. Nothing, but his eyelids tensed, slightly, as if that name had torn through his chest like a storm. She stepped back. Her heart raced. Her hands trembled. "You remember me, don't you?" Still motionless, but his jaw clenched, almost imperceptibly, as if that was the only way he could scream. Yes. The shock was overwhelming. The idea that he might be faking paralysis seemed absurd, and yet it made too much sense. Eyes don't lie. There was recognition. There was pain. And more than anything, there was guilt. In the days that followed, Isabella avoided confrontation. But their glances became messages. When she entered the room, he blinked. When she approached, he moved a finger, slightly, but enough to let her know he was there, and so was she. Despite the anger, despite the years, despite everything, something between them had never died. It was a sunny morning when Isabella saw something she shouldn't have. She was changing Gabriel's bed sheets when she opened the medicine cabinet and found a small container hidden behind the usual prescription bottles. It wasn't from the local pharmacy. It wasn't listed on the official clinic spreadsheet. A quick search revealed it was a restricted muscle relaxant, used in extreme cases to simulate muscular flaccidity. Her stomach turned. Someone was drugging Gabriel, on purpose, to keep him immobilized. Or worse, Gabriel was agreeing to it, for some reason. That same afternoon, while adjusting his pillows, she noticed his left foot moved slightly when no one was watching. She mentioned it cautiously to the housekeeper. The woman cut her off coldly. "Careful what you say, Isabella. Some things are better left unnoticed." That evening, during the staff dinner, Renato appeared without warning. He was unusually cheerful, showering the team with exaggerated compliments, asking about their families, offering wine. It was so off-tone, it bordered on absurd. Then he approached Isabella, drink in hand, wearing a sideways grin. "How's the East Wing treating you?" "It's been challenging," she replied flatly. "I can imagine. Caring for someone like my brother with that history must be strange." "What history?" Renato leaned slightly closer, whispering, "You probably know better than anyone." She froze. He knew. Something. Maybe everything. And in that instant, Isabella felt the threat in the air, like an invisible noose tightening slowly around her neck. That night, when she entered Gabriel's room, she found a folded note between the sheets, something that couldn't have ended up there by accident. It was a page torn from a book. On the back, written by hand, "Help me, they know." The floor vanished beneath her. The puzzle pieces were coming together, but the puzzle itself was dangerous, and her heart, no matter how much it tried to resist, had already begun to beat differently again. For the man now lying silent and desperate, and the question haunting her most was, why was he pretending? To protect himself? Because of blackmail? Or because of love? The atmosphere between Isabella and Gabriel grew heavier with each passing day. There was a kind of silent choreography between them. She would speak, and he would blink. She moved closer, and he moved a finger. Few noticed. But she, who knew every micro-expression of her children, understood what it meant when someone communicated only with their eyes, restrained desperation. And still, there was tenderness. At night, after everyone else had gone to sleep, she would sit by his side, play soft music from her phone, and read him short passages from books. One evening, without thinking, she recited a poem she had loved in her teenage years, and watched tears roll slowly down Gabriel's cheeks. She gently wiped them away, her hand lingering on his face for a moment longer than necessary. "I still don't know if I hate you," she whispered, "or if my heart recognized you the moment I saw you again." And he closed his eyes, as if to say, "I don't know either." But the world around them wouldn't let that connection bloom freely. Renato intensified his presence in the house. He started showing up at odd hours, inviting Isabella for casual chats in the garden, always with that same tone, seductive and vaguely threatening. In one of them, he said, "You know, my brother almost got married before the accident." No, it was a business arrangement, of course, but he ran from it. And look where he ended up. She understood the message. Gabriel wasn't just a patient. He was the heir to a financial empire, and it seemed he was paying the price for going against the family's plans. Adelaide, the matriarch, also began to show visible displeasure at the growing bond between the two. During a brief visit to her son's room, she shot Isabella a cold look and said sharply, "You're starting to think you matter here, aren't you?" Isabella said nothing, but inside, she burned. One night, as she gently caressed Gabriel's hand, she whispered, "I don't know if I'm falling for you again, or if I never stopped loving you." His eyes sparkled. The answer, once again, came in silence, but the world was about to shatter that silence violently. The next morning, something felt off. When Isabella entered the room, she noticed Gabriel's pillows were out of place. The bed's control panel, normally clipped to the side rail, was on the floor, and there were faint fingerprints on the window, as if someone had tried to support themselves. She asked the housekeeper if anyone had entered during the night. The response was fast and cold. "Mr. Gabriel is resting. Always. Nothing is out of place." But something was. Checking the dresser drawer, Isabella found a crumpled piece of paper among the folded clothes. A recent medical report. It showed normal levels of muscular mobility, completely inconsistent with the official diagnosis of full paralysis. She hid the report between the pages of her notebook and decided to seek out Donna Celia, the only person she still trusted. "They're lying to me, aren't they?" she asked, eyes full of anguish. "They're not just lying to you, child," Celia replied softly. "They've been lying to everyone, for years." That same day, Isabella saw Renato handing an envelope to a man she'd never seen before. The exchange was brief, at the side gate of the estate. Inside the envelope, sealed documents, and a dark bottle with a medicinal label. The next day, Gabriel was more lethargic than ever. Isabella held his hand tightly and whispered, "I know you're awake. I saw the report. They're drugging you. But why? Why are you letting them?" he cried. 2 silent tears. That's when she realized something even darker. Gabriel wasn't pretending for pride. He was being silenced, controlled, possibly threatened. And as she drew closer to the truth, the mansion began to feel like a trap. Renato's presence intensified. Adelaide's coldness turned almost cruel. More than anything, Isabella began to feel she was being followed. At night, she heard footsteps behind her door. Objects were moved. Some of her clothes appeared torn. Once, she found a letter from her children, one she had hidden in a book, ripped to shreds and tossed in the bathroom trash. This wasn't a love story anymore. It was a battlefield, and she was in the middle of it, heart burning, mind wide awake. It was a silent, rain-soaked night when Isabella saw Gabriel standing for the first time. Yes, standing. She had gotten up in the middle of the night after hearing a strange noise from the east wing. Without turning on the lights, she followed the sound down the hallway toward Gabriel's room. And there, under the dim glow of a forgotten lamp, she saw him, leaning against the doorframe, breathless, as if he had just won a battle against his own body. She choked back a scream. Her heart nearly stopped. "Gabriel," she whispered, barely believing it. He turned slowly, his eyes wide, like he had been caught in the act. "Isabella," he said, his voice hoarse, cracked with time. "You shouldn't be here." She froze, dizzy, nauseous. You can walk?" He nodded, a subtle, sorrowful, devastated motion. "How long?" "Always." The ground vanished. Reality shattered. Isabella felt like she was floating in a nightmare. Her hands trembled. She couldn't breathe. "So all this time, you were pretending?" Gabriel tried to approach, but she stepped back. "Why?" she screamed, unable to hold back the tears. "I didn't have a choice," he murmured. "They locked me in here, made me sign papers, give up control of the company, the fortune, in exchange for silence. Pretending to be paralyzed was the only way to stay alive. And me? Seeing me? Recognizing me? Knowing I was right here and saying nothing? If I said anything, you'd be in danger too." She collapsed to the floor, drained. The mansion seemed to shake around her. Every memory, every glance exchanged in silence, now turned to poison. "I loved you," she whispered, barely audible. "I still do," he said, kneeling in front of her. "And every second I pretended not to see you was torture, a price I paid, to protect you." But what he didn't know, and what was coming next, was even worse. The next morning, Isabella disappeared from the house. No note, no message, no explanation. She didn't go to the clinic, didn't answer the work phone, didn't show up to administer his medication. Her room was perfectly tidy, clothes folded, and the drawings her children had pinned to the walls were gone. Gabriel panicked. He dragged himself out of bed, pushing his body to move, stumbled down the hallway, only to be intercepted by Renato, who was waiting with a sharp smile. Well, finally decided to get up, brother. Took you long enough to drop the act. What did you do to her?" "Me? Nothing. But women who start digging too deep sometimes trip, you know?" Gabriel lunged at him, but 2 security guards appeared. In seconds, he was dragged back to the room, restrained, sedated. Meanwhile, Isabella had fled to her aunt's house, with the children. She was trying to sort out her thoughts. She wanted to hate him, wanted to forget him, but everything hurt too much. The truth was too fresh, the fear too real, and his words kept echoing in her mind. Pretending was the only way to stay alive. The next night, she received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a photo. Gabriel, once again tied to the bed, bruises on his wrists, and on the back of the picture, just 4 handwritten words: "You have to come back." Isabella trembled. The instinct to protect him surged inside her. She didn't want to forgive, but she couldn't abandon him either. Not now. Not after everything. It was as if her love for him was stronger than the pain, or maybe just more stubborn than the fear. But deep down, what weighed even more was something else. The children, and the fact that Gabriel still didn't know he was their father. Isabella went days without being able to look at her own reflection. In her eyes, there was no strength left, only exhaustion. The revelation that Gabriel could walk, that he had been pretending all this time, had broken her. She had trusted him. Worse, she had felt again, She had allowed herself to dream. Now, she no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. Mother, caregiver, or just another piece used in someone else's twisted game. The children felt her absence. Even without understanding the details, they sensed the silence. The drawings stopped. So did the laughter. One of the boys asked, "Mommy, don't you love us anymore?" She held back tears like someone holding up the sky, kissed him and whispered, "I love you more than anything. I'm just fixing my heart." Meanwhile, Gabriel was at war inside the mansion. Renato increased the sedation. The housekeeper now watched him day and night. Nurses were replaced, and whatever small freedom he had vanished. He had been exposed, and in a house ruled by power and image, betrayal was never forgiven. His isolation became physical and psychological. For days, Gabriel was kept cut off from the world. No windows, no phone, no Isabella, and that hurt more than any drug. He didn't know where she was, didn't know if she'd come back, and above all, he didn't know if he would ever get the chance to say what he never had the courage to admit. That night in Edinburgh wasn't a mistake. It was the only real thing in a life built on lies. But time was passing, and with it, the patience of those who ran that house. Gabriel had become a problem, and in that family, problems were disposable. On a gray afternoon, Isabella received an unexpected call. It was Donna Celia. "He's not doing well, dear. They're trying to erase him completely." "What do you mean?" "They're changing his meds, making him slower, more faded. Do you really think they'll let you come back? He only survived this long because you were close." Isabella hung up with trembling hands. She knew she was facing a choice: run for good, rebuild her life far from that rotting world, or return, face the monster, and protect the man who, even in silence, had given her 3 children and a wound that still bled. That same day, as she was still reflecting, she received another letter, this time written in a child's hand. "Mommy, we dreamed of a sad man. He had your eyes. Why doesn't he smile?" It was too much. Isabella collapsed. She cried like she hadn't in years, on her knees in the middle of the room, her soul bare, her heart broken. That night she made a decision. She returned to the mansion without warning, didn't knock, slipped through the back door, like she had on her first shifts. She found Donna Celia in the kitchen, who hugged her tight, like someone clinging to a falling person. "He's weaker," she whispered. "Barely responds. Renato says he's sending him to a clinic in Switzerland, one no one returns from." Isabella ran to the east wing. She found Gabriel unconscious, his breathing heavy, lips pale. "Gabriel," she cried, holding his face. "Listen to me. Stay with me, please. I came back." He didn't react. Her tears soaked his chest. "I hate you for lying, but I hate it even more that you're leaving. I need you alive. Our children need you." And then, like a miracle, his fingers moved, weak but alive. Isabella gasped. "You heard me?" He blinked. Once. She understood. He was there, still there, but barely. Then the bedroom door burst open. Renato entered with 2 security guards. "Visiting hours are over, Isabella. You're no longer welcome here." She stood up, eyes blazing. "He's the father of my children, and you will not erase that." The room fell silent like a lightning strike. Renato froze. "What?" "You heard me. 3 kids, your nephews. And if you lay a hand on him again, I will go all the way." Renato laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "And who's going to believe you?" "Everyone. Because this time, I have proof." She pulled from her pocket the test, the photo, the note. "And if anything happens to me, these are already with someone I trust." Renato stared at her with rage, but he knew. The game had changed. For now, 4 days had passed since the confrontation with Renato, and since then, Isabella hadn't stopped. While Gabriel recovered, she went to the police, submitted the documents, filed an official complaint, delivered copies of medical reports, handwritten notes, photos. But she knew, against families like the Grahams, justice moved in slow motion. So, she chose strategy. She compiled everything onto an encrypted flash drive, recorded videos explaining the full story, and sent them to a lawyer, an old friend of her aunt's, who immediately filed for guardianship and opened an investigation into abuse, unlawful imprisonment, and medical record falsification. And Isabella took care of herself too. She cut her hair, shorter, modern, let her curls out, free and proud, bought new clothes with the emergency savings she'd tucked away for years. Most of all, she began to smile again. Without guilt, she felt lighter, stronger, whole. She wasn't just a woman who loved, she was a woman who fought, who protected, who demanded respect. The kids noticed the change. "Mommy, you look like a superhero," they said, seeing her dressed to go out, low heels and a folder in hand. "I'm trying to be," she replied, kissing each of them on the forehead. The next evening, Isabella returned to the mansion, but not as a caregiver, as a woman, a mother, someone who now had the power to burn it all down, if she wanted. The housekeeper tried to stop her. "I'm here to see the father of my children," she said, holding up a legal document on her phone. "If you block me, you'll be obstructing justice." The woman stepped aside. Isabella climbed the stairs to Gabriel's room. He was better, sitting up, more alert. His gaze was tired, but full of emotion. "You came back," he said, voice rough but alive. "I did, but not like before. Now I stand beside you, or in front of you, never behind again." He smiled through teary eyes. "Do I deserve your forgiveness? I don't know yet," she answered honestly. "But you deserve a chance to be a father, and to be a man." In that room, she touched him with more strength, more truth, more clarity about everything they had lived through and survived. And for the first time, since Edinburgh, Gabriel cried. For real. The following week, Isabella didn't just return to the mansion. She took over part of the medical administration of Gabriel's care, with full legal backing. The staff was reevaluated, the family's lawyer summoned, and Renato, cornered. The news started to spread. Local gossip blogs posted the first headlines. Graham heir held against his will. Ex-employee files charges of abuse and fraud in historic estate. The family tried to contain it, but the damage was done. On the 8th morning, Isabella was summoned by Renato. A peace talk. He waited in the office, seated behind his father's old desk. "You've won," he said, fingers steepled. "But don't think this will last. These things are always settled quietly. That's how it's always been." "Not anymore," she replied. "From now on, everything comes to light, and I'm not alone." She pulled a document from her bag, a signed power of attorney from Gabriel, restoring part of his rights and naming Isabella as his temporary representative in all matters of health and safety. "This is illegal," Renato shouted, standing. "What's illegal is what you did to your own brother." Renato shoved the chair back, furious. "You really think he'll choose you? A caregiver? Some woman who just showed up?" Isabella stepped closer, meeting his eyes. "I didn't show up from nowhere. I'm his past, his present, and, if he chooses, maybe his future." She turned and walked out, left him there, alone, choking on defeat. That night, Gabriel waited in the garden, sitting under a blanket beneath the soft light of the veranda. She walked over, and for the first time they sat side by side. No fear, no masks, no pretending. "I still don't know what's ahead for us," she said, looking at the stars. "I know what I want it to be," he replied. She slowly turned her head. He was looking at her, like that first night. But now there was no euphoria. There was truth. There was pain. There was life. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Then let's find out, together." And with a trembling voice he whispered, "I want to meet my children." She smiled. "And they want to meet you." The sun had barely risen when Isabella was awakened by an urgent call from Donna Celia. The mansion was in chaos. Renato had tried to forcibly transfer Gabriel to a private clinic in the middle of the night. No legal authorization, no medical justification. Isabella raced to the estate. She arrived just in time to see clinic medics wheeling Gabriel out on a stretcher, nearly unconscious, intubated, like a drugged prisoner. "Stop!" she shouted, stepping in front of the ambulance. "I'm his legal representative, and this is kidnapping." The driver hesitated. Renato appeared moments later, tense, holding his phone. "Get out of the way, Isabella. This has nothing to do with you." "It does. He's the father of my children, and I'm the only one here who wants to see him truly alive." Those words froze everything. One of the medics looked confused. The driver shut off the engine. Silence fell. Renato stepped toward her slowly, his eyes red, with rage. "You think you're going to steal everything from my family, is that it? I don't want anything that isn't mine. But you're about to lose everything." She pulled out an emergency court order. A judge had granted it just hours earlier, blocking any transfer of Gabriel without full medical evaluation. "Try to take me down now," she said calmly, "and I'll take you down with everything." Renato paled. He knew he was trapped. Police officers called by Donna Celia arrived minutes later. The ambulance was dismissed. Gabriel was taken back to his room, and Isabella never left his side. Hours later, when Gabriel woke, weak but conscious, she held his hand gently. "It's over, Gabriel. No one's going to hurt you now." He tried to speak, but she placed a finger over his lips. "Wait, let me finish. I hated you. I loved you. I feared you. I desired you. And I blamed you." She took a breath, looked him straight in the eye. "But today, all I want is to live the truth with you. No past, no lies, no pretending." Tears rolled down his cheeks, and with a trembling hand, he reached up to touch her face. "Do you forgive me?" "I already have," she said with a gentle smile. "I just needed to forgive myself first." And in that moment, Gabriel did the unthinkable. He pulled her gently closer and kissed her, a kiss that was slow, painful, and freeing. The next day, for the first time in 5 years, Gabriel left the East Wing. He walked slowly, supported by Isabella, to the garden where life suddenly made more sense. The children were already waiting. 3 small bodies, curious eyes, messy hair, and hearts pounding in expectation. Isabella knelt and whispered, "This is your daddy." They said nothing at first. They felt it. Then, without hesitation, the youngest ran up to Gabriel and hugged his legs. "Hi, Daddy." Tears flooded Gabriel's eyes. He knelt slowly, with effort, and wrapped all 3 in his trembling arms. And for one brief, eternal moment, time stood still. From a distance, Isabella watched, her chest full of love, of fear, of relief, and something new, peace. In the days that followed, the mansion changed. Renato was indicted. Adelaide stepped down from managing the family estate. The press covered every detail, but the most important part wasn't in the news. It was in the kitchen, where Gabriel fumbled through making pancakes for the kids. It was on the porch, where he read them bedtime stories with tired eyes. It was in Isabella's gaze, finally facing forward, without the weight of the past. In the final scene, the 2 of them sit side by side, watching the children play in the garden. "You think we can start over?" he asks, voice soft. She smiles, a clean smile, a free one. "I don't want to start over," she says. "I want to continue, from here." He laces his fingers through hers, and in that quiet moment, they both understand. Life may lie, people may fall, but love, when it's real, always finds a way to return. Time passed. Not too much, but enough for everything to change. Gabriel learned to walk again, steadily. He began a new routine, far from the weight of his family's control, learning to be a father, a partner, and most of all, a real man. Not by title, but by choice. The man who once fell, lied, and hid no longer existed. In his place stood someone who finally understood the value of truth, even when it hurt. Isabella rebuilt herself too. She took courses, finished the degree she had once abandoned, launched a small online business in personalized home care. But more than that, she rediscovered her love for herself. She realized she didn't need someone to save her. She needed someone who would walk beside her, with respect, honesty, and commitment. The kids grew up surrounded by laughter, messes, and deep affection. They had a present father, clumsy but loving, and a warrior mother who taught them, by example, that falling is part of life, but getting back up is a choice. Gabriel and Isabella learned that love doesn't survive on broken promises or faded memories. It only thrives when watered with truth. And although they began in silence and deception, they ended in courage and forgiveness. And that changed everything. Because sometimes life throws us off a cliff, just to prove we know how to fly. On a spring morning, Isabella woke up to the sound of children's laughter in the backyard, and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. She came downstairs to find Gabriel attempting to make cheese bread, using a recipe that clearly wasn't working. She laughed. He looked up with a face that already admitted defeat. "Well, no one can say I didn't try," he said, holding up the tragic tray. She walked over, stole a burnt piece, and replied, "Sometimes, trying is everything." They looked at each other for a few seconds. The world seemed to slow down. And without any big ceremony, Gabriel pulled a small box from his pocket. "This isn't a proposal," he said. "It's a question." She raised an eyebrow. "Do you want to keep going with me?" Isabella smiled, took the box, closed it again, and tucked it back into his pocket. "Ask me again, when the cheese bread turns out right." And she walked away, laughing. He watched her, mesmerized. In the end, he didn't need promises or rings. Not that day. He just needed her. And she needed him. Sometimes starting over doesn't mean erasing the past. It means looking at it and choosing to move forward anyway. In the hallway mirror before heading out, Isabella paused. She looked at herself, hair down, fewer shadows under her eyes, posture steady, and for a moment, she whispered, "You survived. But more than that, you chose to live." Then she closed the door behind her, carrying only what fate once tried to hide. But love insisted on revealing 3 little hearts, and a story that no longer needed to be a secret. Your heart knows the way. Subscribe and follow the beauty.